Hi, how you doing? Today's January 27th, Monday, and I think today is exactly 16 weeks until Victoria Day May long weekend in Canada, which for our area in Saskatchewan is generally around last frost date. I like to wait about another week, but it really does depend on the weather. Some warm season things I like to wait until the beginning of June. However, 16 weeks, and I have these geraniums that I'd like to take cuttings of, as well as plant some perennial Campanula. So I thought I'd do that today, and I thought maybe you'd like to come along and do it along with me. My name is Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. Before I actually start taking the cuttings, I thought I'd show you a couple of cuttings that I did take at two different times and the progress that they've made so far. This one I took in September, and it is doing very well. All of this at the top is new growth. When I took the cutting, it was only 3 leaves. And as well, it's now pushing a whole bunch of growth right at the base there. So that's nice to see. And if that continues, I could almost take this top part off and do another cutting, but I'll leave it. And then it had pushed a bud flower. I just picked that off. I don't want it to flower just yet. And I'm just going to show you as well what the roots look like. It won't, I don't think it will have filled the pot, but oh, look at that. It's actually looking really good. So that one is, let's say 4 months old since I stuck the cutting. And I think that's going to be a nice plant. The second cutting I took was 3 weeks ago. It actually wasn't a cutting, it was a piece that broke off, and I decided to stick it in some soil. At the time, I think there was only the 2 leaves on it, and it didn't have very much for nodes down there at all. It was basically a broken piece, but I put it in the soil and I put it on the heat mat. I checked it a few days later, and you know, I do the little tug test to see if it's coming out easily or not, and it did seem like it rooted fairly quickly that way. So again, I'm just going to show you what the roots look like 3 weeks after sticking the cutting. This will probably fall apart a little bit more, but that's okay. Yeah, that one's not coming out quite so easy. There we go. Oh, there is. That's amazing. In 3 weeks, the roots that a geranium will put on. So they're easy to, the cuttings are easy to take. They're easy to do. I'm growing them cool down here in the basement. And as a result, cool with, you know, really bright light. As a result, it's got nice tight growth. It wants to push a little flower bud there. I think I'll take that off. And it's not growing too fast and too wild. If it's really warm, they might grow too fast. So as soon as I knew it was rooted, I took it off the heat because I didn't want it to continue growing in warmth like that. I didn't want it to get too big too fast. So those are the 2 that I've already done. So the first thing you want to do when you want to get your plant ready for taking the cuttings is you want to cut off all the flowers that are blooming as well as any of the buds. From now on, well, I mean, I probably should have been doing this all along, but they were just so pretty and it didn't seem to be hurting the plant at all. So I let it continue to flower. But now we want all the growth, all the energy to go into making new roots instead of flowers. So also any new buds that come up, they'll need to be clipped off. And Nice long flowers. I actually put a few of these in a vase to see how long they lasted, and it's surprising how long they did last. It had to be over a week that they stayed in a little vase of water. This plant has been doing this with no fertilizer. I find that somewhat amazing as well. It just really wants to grow and bloom. Okay. The other thing we want to do, and we can do that as well as we're going through, is take off the old leaves, the kind of yellowing, or any of the dry leaves, because they will be of no use now. So I'm going to cut it right back to just a couple inches from the base, and then take a look at it and see what I can do with this. I'm going to take all of the, I'm going to cut them all first and then stick them in the soil after I'm done cutting what I want from this plant. I have a bunch of pots ready to go to fill with soil, and so I'm going to start at the top here. That right there is a little flower bud, and so I'm going to cut it here just below a node. A node is where the leaves were, and it's just this little bump on the stem. Actually, maybe I'll cut it here below this node, because I don't think there will be growth coming from there. And then I'm going to pick off almost all of the leaves. And the reason for that is you don't really want a whole lot of leaf on top, because it still needs, it's got no roots to provide moisture to those leaves. So until it has some roots to do that, it's best to have a very small leaf structure. So that's cutting number one. This is the second piece of that stem. And again, I'm going to trim off those leaves. I'll leave two, and this here is a little flower bud. So I'm going to pick that off too. And you'll see how this comes out of another stem. And so in order to take that cutting, I'm going to cut just below there, and then when I put it in the soil, I'm going to put it in that way, but the growth will start going up. So I think that should work just fine like that. Now I'm going to take as many cuttings as I can from this plant, because it's getting a little crazy under the lights here, so I need to cut it back anyway. And I'm going to then choose the best ones that I like to take the cuttings. And the ones that I like the most are always the ones that have tip growth, and not like this one that I just showed you with a funny stem coming from a main stem. And I just showed you that to show that you can also take a cutting from this. It doesn't have to be from the tip, but the tip will be the nicest. There's nice growth coming from here. There's two nice leaves coming from the top. That's a nice tip. I call it a tip cutting, a cutting from the tip of the plant, or from the growth point of the plant. And there's two nice nodes that I will sink. I'll probably sink it right down to there into the soil. And so you can see here there are 1, 2, 3. These are nice and tight nodes. They're going to push roots from those nodes. So this one has already been cut here. It's dry. Maybe that was the broken part. I don't recall. But it's got all this growth off the side. So I think I'm going to try this. There's no harm in trying. I'm going to try doing this as a cutting number 1 from that stem. And then this one, although it's very small, it only has one node down here. I'll push it up to this one though, and I think it should push growth. I think it should root. So ideally you want, you know, I go for 2 to 3 nodes, but this one that I showed you, that only had the one. It was basically broken right there, and I pushed it into the soil and it rooted just fine. Oh, I'd like to have at least a dozen of these, so I may need to take some of those kind of wild looking cuttings like this one and hope that I get a plant coming out of there. I think I will. This is a good one to show. I just wanted to show you all of that new growth that's coming out of this main stem. See there? This part of the stem has, oh, that was probably a flower stem, but that's kind of all stopped growing, but it is coming out along the stem now, as well as a little bit of out of the top. So that's going to be a wee little cutting with wee little leaves. We'll see how that goes. Same thing here. This is a cut, and this is the cut I just took, and there's a little bit of growth coming from this point right here, so I'm going to try and root it that way, and I'll push it into the soil right up to there. This is the same cut on top, a cut on the bottom, but there's new growth coming from the side, so I'm going to push it in right to that new growth. And I think we almost have everything that we can get from this plant. This I don't think. I'll show you this one. Although this has a leaf coming here, I don't see any growth coming here. So I don't think this would make a viable cutting. I mean, it might root, but I'm not sure that it would actually grow anywhere. So I'm not going to use this one. So I just wanted to show you what's left of that plant now. And now is a good time if you wanted to shape it. You could do it now. If it had maybe crossing branches or something like that, you could get rid of those. And also take off any of these, that's from a flower stem. Clean up any of that growth so that it doesn't invite any kind of pests or, things that like to live on the soil and turn into a bother. And this plant now is going to continue to grow. And, geraniums actually, you can cut like that far from the ground and they will continue to grow. Sometimes in the spring, if you buy geraniums and they're kind of overgrown, you can do that. You can cut them right back and it's amazing the nice growth that they will. So now I'm going to just put that back under the lights and let it do its thing. It's going to push new growth, and it's going to, the growth underneath is going to have access to light now, but before it there was just too much of a canopy of leaves, and the grow lights are not quite like outside light, so it's concentrated so much from the top. Anyways, it's going to go back under the lights and we'll get going on the next one. So I think before I get started on doing the next one, I'm going to fill the pots and stick these in soil so that I don't get mixed up. I'm sure that I will know the color before I actually go to plant them. I'm fairly certain they'll be blooming, but just to be safe, I do have two different colors, and so I'm going to use black pots for these hot pink ones, and then the terracotta color pots for the light pink ones that I'll do next. So I already have some soil pre-moistened a bit here. What I should do is just move that over. If you have ProMix, dry ProMix, or any of those kinds of mixes, and they have a fairly high peat and vermiculite, or sorry, not vermiculite, perlite content, I really highly recommend wetting it down in a container first and letting it soak some. Otherwise, you really should use a mask, because the perlite particles just float around and they get in your lungs, and not very pleasant. So I should have counted, but I think I have about 12. I like to keep the soil fairly loose. I was taught by someone once to rub, not to pat, because you don't want to push it down too much so that those little baby roots have to fight their way into the soil. I fill them right to the top, and then after, when they're watered, it does settle the soil a little bit more. I think you can also, I don't think I've ever tried it, but I think you can also take cuttings of geraniums in water. I've never, like I said, I've never tried it. This way seems far too easy. And so, I don't know if anybody has experience with geraniums in water. Perhaps you could chime in. So, the simple process. I also usually have a dibbler on hand. You know, the eraser of a pencil also works really good, or the end of a Sharpie works pretty good, or a pen, anything that you can poke a hole in the soil and just bury it right to there. I don't pack it too much in there. And this is one of those that's cut on both ends. I'm just going to leave that one to the side for a minute and see if I still need it at the end of it all. This is another one that's cut on both ends, but this one has a little bit better growth. It's not off to the side quite so much. That's a beautiful cutting right there. I'll just show you what that looks like. It's down quite far. just need to be a little bit careful when you're pushing it in from the top. You don't want to be breaking off any of that soft growth at the top. I think I can get a few more yet. I love this color, so I'm happy to get more. Oops. Maybe 5 more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them on the heat mat. I landed up finding another cutting in the soil as I was moving it around. So I have 16 and I'm just going to leave them there. They don't need it. They don't need a humidity dome. All they need is a little bit of warmth. Now, if you don't have a heat mat and you're just doing this, you can certainly just do this, you know, in a window, in a sunny window, not too sunny at first because of course they don't have the roots, but you can in a bright light area you could do this in room temperature and they're going to root just fine as well. It may take just a few days longer. In that case it would be beneficial to have a tray. The other thing that I use with these 1-inch pots, because you know these 1-inch pots, or 2-inch maybe, 2.5 is what this says. Anyways, these ones that are, they just don't stand very well on their own, and so I like to save these. You can plant in these, of course, but I like to use these for that. And that way these are still loose, individual. It's not in a cell pack. I really like these for this exact reason, for holding these in a more stable position. So I have 2 more of these to do. I don't know if you saw my previous video where I explained these, but when I potted these plants were smaller than that hot pink one, and so I put 3 plants per pot in each of these 2 pots. And I think I should get a fair amount of cuttings. And I don't have room on the heat mat, so maybe I'll be rooting some of these upstairs in room temperature as well. So I'm just going to work away here, and when you see it, I'm going to be working very fast. Maybe you could enjoy a little bit of music here. So that's what's left of the 2 light pink ones. And same thing, I'm going to put them back under the lights and let them regrow. I landed up with just over 20 cuttings, I think. And I have 19 of these pots, so there's going to be 19. Maybe I'll use another terracotta colored pot, but I don't have any more this size. I also wanted to mention, I said to be careful with these soils that have perlite in them. And the one that I like to use, and I use it for almost everything, including seeding, is ProMix HP, and that's for high porosity. And that means that it has some extra perlite in it. And that just helps to keep the soil really loose. It has nothing, It doesn't aid in moisture retention at all, but it helps to keep that soil really loose so that plants have a nice, it's not compact at all, so that it's nice and loose for them to put down roots. You know, you buy the Pro Mix in those great big bales, and that's exactly what I do. Okay, good to go. Again, we're just going to take it. It's fairly loose. I'm not going to use the dibbler, I don't think. And just poke it right in. You'll feel a little bit of resistance as it gets going down to the bottom. And as long as you're not pushing on this top soft growth, if you're pushing down here where there's a little bit more of a stiffer stem, you'll be fine. You could tell these are the spacing of the nodes on these last plants, and I think it was because there's just so much growth that they're actually reaching for light. It doesn't appear that way at the top, but these nodes are really far apart, unless that's the habit of this plant. What's going on here? You also may be wondering why, if you need to use rooting hormone, and you do not. I've never used rooting hormone for geraniums. Geraniums just really want to grow. Just give them a little opportunity and they will do that. For those who may not know, geraniums are actually a tender perennial. And they are not just an annual. And their Latin name is not geranium, it is pelargonium. And there are many, many different cultivars and varieties and colors and sizes, and I actually really like geraniums. You know, last year I had them planted in pots, and we had such a horrible June. And these and another plant, the Calibrachoa. Those were the only ones that survived nicely through that awful June and all that cold weather, all that wind that we had. My plants were breaking left, right, and center. They were freezing. They were awful. And the geraniums, they took all that without even blinking. I was so impressed with them. So as much as I love to try a whole bunch of different and new plants, again, there's a reason why some of these things are old standbys, and why our grandmas always had them growing in the kitchen window in tobacco cans. And that's the reason, because they are just amazing plants. They take a beating and they keep on ticking. So there we go. Those are the light pink ones, 3 dozen or so, and I think that should be hopefully plenty for what I'm hoping to use them for. So I'm just going to clean this up, and then I'm still going to quickly seed the Campanula. So here's my supplies for starting the seeds. I still will use the Pro Mix HP, but I like to sieve out the bigger bits. This is going to be a fine seed, and it will need a fine mix. Also, I'm just going to use one of these little deli containers with a lid, and one of these little seed starting things there. Cells, I guess that would be the word. So I'm just going to sieve that out. So that becomes a much finer mix, and the seed will have an easier time, as opposed to, say, it got under something like that. A fine seed would not be able to make it through, or even these bigger bits of perlite, which is excellent for drainage. And there's nothing wrong with this soil. It can certainly be used again. I think that's actually going to be enough. I just need this one. So when you're seeding, it is beneficial to pack just very slightly, not hard. You still want the roots to be able to get down into that soil, but at the same time, you want that soil to be all the way down. Watering it will help settle it a bit as well. Now, this is what I'm going to grow, hopefully. It is a perennial, and on the back it tells me to start. It says hardy to zone 3, and to start it, light aids germination. It says to seed it 1/8 inch. I'm going to put it right on the surface, and then I'm going to top it with a little bit of vermiculite. Vermiculite will hold in a bit of moisture, as well as still allow the light to go through to the seed. It also, on the back here, says 10 to 12 weeks before planting outdoors. You know, we're ahead of that by a month. And I think I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll be able to take it out to the greenhouse sometime in April. And if it's nice enough outside, you know, I'll be hardening them off very quickly. Don't know how big these seeds are, but they certainly feel like they're going to be really, really tiny. So this is Campanula, portenschlagiana, or muralis, also known as Dalmatian Bellflower and Alpine Campanula. I think it also says on here 12 to 15 seeds. So I don't know if you can see that pepper inside of the package there. They are super small. So I am just gonna, it actually says on there not to just press it into the soil. There's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, there's some in the corner. I'll have to work on getting those out. Just try not to get them all in the same spot. Oh my gosh, those are small. So I think I got them all. I sure want to make sure I do, because that's 12 bits of pepper for $4.75, so you kind of want to make sure. All right, and then I will just cover with a bit of vermiculite. And I'm going to give it a little bit of water. I want as fine a mist as it'll. Okay, where's my tray? There it is. It's going to go in here with the lid on to keep humidity. And it also says on here that it might take 14 to 30 days to germinate at 65 to 70, which is 18 to 21 C. So I am not going to put it. I'm not going to put it on the heat mat. I can't. There's no room. And I am going to put it. I've just put another. I've put another deli container there just to raise it up a little bit. It's cool down here, so just putting it a little bit higher, closer to the lights. I mean, they don't give off a lot of heat, but there is a little bit of warmth there, so that might help bring the temperature up just slightly. While we're down here, I thought I'd show you the Lisianthus seedlings, how they're coming along. I think this might be, I seeded them in mid-December, so we're maybe about 6 weeks in. So I think they're doing okay. Yesterday they got their first fertilizing, and they're pushing their second set of true leaves. You can hardly see that because they're so tiny. But yeah, I think they're good. Thanks very much for joining me today. That's all of my tasks for today. I hope you found it informative, interesting, enjoyable in some way. If you did, consider giving me a thumbs up, tell your friends, and hit that subscribe button. Thanks again. See you.